You may be seated. It's noonday, and Jesus has been traveling on foot. And Jesus has decided to stop and rest for a little bit. And he's chosen an old well curve as his resting place. When our story opens in John chapter 4, Jesus is all alone. His friends have gone into the village of Sychar to buy food for the noonday meal. And as Jesus sits on that well curve and he looks across the plain, he's looking toward the village. And he sees a woman walking toward him. She has her water pitcher on her shoulder. And it's somewhat unusual, quite irregular, that she would come for water in the heat of the day. But this woman has her own reasons for coming at that time. She dreads the hot rays of the noonday sun as much as anyone else. And yet, the hot rays of the noonday sun are preferable to the hot scorn and contempt of her respectable sisters. You see, it's common knowledge to anyone and everyone in the village that this woman coming to the well that day is an outcast woman. Many years earlier, perhaps when she was quite young, she had married. And she perhaps entered into that beautiful relationship with high hopes and fine dreams. Then again, maybe not. Maybe she was cheap and maybe she was flippant from the very beginning. We're not told those facts. Maybe she'd run away with another man. Or it might have been that this woman was more sinned against than she was guilty of sinning. Her husband might have been a bit of a brute that made their home a literal hell on earth. Be that as it may, whatever happened, whatever went wrong, her first marriage had ended up on the rocks. But as the old saying goes, hope springs eternal inside the human breast. And so she made a second venture. And for her, that also ended in disaster. Then followed a third, a fourth, and even a fifth marriage. In fact, for her, it had almost become a habit. She started to flit from husband to husband like a bird would flit from one branch to another in a tree. She would have been quite at home in our world of the 21st century. But having made 5 failures, at last she just gave up on the enterprise completely. Having made 5 failures, she abandoned the struggle. I can almost hear her saying to herself, why should I do it? Why should I go through the formality of a ceremony anymore? Why promise to cleave to a man until death when I know that marriage is only going to last till the first sharp quarrel or we grow weary and tired of each other? So somewhere along the way, this woman decided that any further marriage would be useless. She decided that from this point on she'd take her man wherever she found him. And she'd live with him then as long as it suited her. Now this woman no doubt had some charm and she had some personality. And she had no doubt one time been an extremely beautiful woman. And that was still obvious and still evident. Life had beaten her up and she bore some scars. But she was still a beautiful woman. And no doubt she was quite intelligent. If you read the story, her conversation with Jesus is indicative that she was intelligent and had a sharp wit. But she's given up all claims to respectability. She's living with a man that's not her husband. And that's no secret in the city of Sychar, the village. Here's the thing. She's been married 5 times. She's living with a man that's not her husband. She's the subject and object of scorn from her respectable sisters within the community. But there's more to this woman than that. And I dare say that what else there was to this woman was known only to her and to Jesus. The whole world knew that this woman had a soiled past. The whole world knew she had a soiled and sordid present. But there was one thing about her the few friends she had did not know. There was something about her that not even the man she was living with knew. It was something that was known only to her and the man sitting beside her on the well curb, because he could see into her heart. And that is that she was terribly dissatisfied with life as she was living it. However hard she tried to shut her eyes, there were times this woman looked at herself in total disgust. And there were times this woman actually hated herself for what she was and for what she had become. I mean, really, think about it. She never dreamed of making the mess of her life she had made. No one ever does. No one ever wakes up one day and says, I'm going to see just how bad a mess I can make out of life. If someone had told her years earlier what her life would be like today, she would have said, no way, that's not me. That's not the way my life's going to be. She would have been filled with hot indignation for someone even suggesting such a thing as that. And yet, she took one wrong step after another. She made one bad decision after another, and finally she had become what she was now. She had taken a journey to the depths where she found herself right now. And she was desperately sick of what she had become. And she knew it. Jesus knew it. But on this day, sitting beside Jesus on a well in Samaria, this woman came face to face with Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ, you see, has confidence in even the most hopeless of men and women. Jesus believed that every man and every woman on the top side of God's green earth had inside them a capacity for Christ-likeness. Jesus saw in every coward a possible hero. Jesus saw in every sinner a possible saint. That's why he spoke to this woman the way he did in verse 10. Where he said, if thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith unto thee, give me to drink, thou wouldst have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. How many times over the years have we read this story of the woman at the well in our years of personal Bible study? How many times have we heard sermons preached from this text in John 4? How many times have our hearts thrilled as Jesus told this woman about living water? How many times have we held out the promise of forgiveness to other outcasts as Jesus held out the promise of forgiveness to this woman? We've preached from verse 24, where Jesus said, God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. But you see, if we keep reading in the story, after Jesus talked to this woman, after Jesus told this woman about living water, she realized she was talking to the Messiah, the one they had waited for. She forgot all about her mission. She forgot all about the fact that she had come to the well there to draw water. She left her water pots. She was so thrilled. She was so excited to have met Jesus. She left her water pots. She went running into the city, and she went there to tell people that she had met Jesus Christ. The apostles were worried because Jesus hadn't had anything to eat. Jesus told them he had meat that they knew nothing about. Jesus told them his meat, his desire, was to do the will of the Father that sent him. And there's this meaningful verse then in verse 35 of John chapter 4, where Jesus said, "Lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are white already unto the harvest." Now you remember this woman left her water pots and she went into the city. Look at verse 39. Many of the Samaritans of the city believed on him for the saying of this woman. So when the Samaritans were coming to him, they besought him that he would tarry with them. And he abode there 2 days. She left her water pot. She went into the city. She told people she had met Jesus. And they believed on him because of what this woman told her. But Jesus said to his disciples, "Lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are white already to the harvest." Almost 24 years ago. It's hard to believe that people say, "How long have you been preaching in Sinners?" I've been here nearly 24 years. And they'll look at me and say, 24 years, same church? 24 years? How have you managed to stay at the same congregation 24 years? I said, well, the truth is, folks there said they didn't want no preaching. And they said I was nearest nothing they'd ever found, so they kept me. 24 years ago, I stood in this same spot right here. And I made a statement then. It was true then, it's true now, and I'll make the same statement today. The greatest days of the Lord's church in Center, Texas are still out there in the future. The greatest days, the greatest accomplishments, the greatest glories of the Lord's church in Center, Texas are yet to be realized. I said that 24 years ago and I haven't changed my mind. I still believe it. I still believe we can accomplish great things for the Lord right here. But if we're going to accomplish great things for the Lord, it's going to take a great vision. Any successful endeavor requires a great vision. Vision. It literally means to see the things that are visible. It also means the ability to see other things. It means unusual competence in discernment or perception. Vision means intelligent foresight. Such ventures as politics or business require men and women of vision. Companies require men and women of vision. Countries need leaders with vision. And without the ability to visualize worthy goals and how those worthy goals might be achieved, very little of importance is ever accomplished. Jesus was sitting on that well curb that day. He was sitting with an outcast woman of Samaria, and what did Jesus see? He saw a soul. A soul that needed saving. A soul that needed to be harvested. And what did she do? She left her water pot. She went into the city to harvest other souls. And John tells us that many people of that village believed on Jesus because of what this woman said. We desperately need today an elevated vision in the Lord's work of what we can accomplish. We need a vision of souls that are ready to be harvested. Jesus had a great vision. And Jesus said, look on the fields, they are white, already to the harvest. Sometimes our vision is inadequate of teaching as many people about Jesus Christ as possible. And that's noble. On the surface, that's a noble vision. But it can be afflicted by our thinking too small concerning what we can do. We can think too generally sometimes of what we might be doing. And our vision, it cannot afford to be too general. No dream has ever been achieved except by someone who dared to take that dream and flesh it out in terms of specifics necessary to make that dream a reality. For example, is there anybody in here that doesn't want to go to heaven? You know, we don't want to be like the little Sunday school class. The teacher in Sunday school class says, everybody that wants to go to heaven, raise your hand. And, you know, little Johnny's always the bad boy in Sunday school, and everybody but little Johnny raised his hand. And the teacher said, Johnny, don't you want to go to heaven when you die? He said, oh, yes, ma'am, when I die. I thought you were giving up a group to go today. Now, everybody wants to go to heaven. All of us want to go to heaven, and it's a great dream. It's also a fine dream to want to serve the Lord faithfully. But what specific things and what specific measures are we going to take to achieve this? What specifically am I going to do to go to heaven when I die? What specifically am I planning to do to serve the Lord faithfully? How much time, how much effort, how much money is it going to take for me to serve the Lord and be faithful in it? We need to see in our vision of the Lord's work. And we need to see it in concrete terms of things we can actually do and plan specifically of how much of them we're going to do. When we do think specifically about the Lord's work, we often fail to set our sights high enough. And I think sometimes it's because we're hindered by our past experiences. People say, well, we've been a lot of effort put forth in the past. It hadn't borne much fruit. Well, we've done that before. It didn't work. We've had congregational efforts in the past. Well, they didn't go anywhere. And then again, maybe sometimes we've just been fed a steady diet of defeatism, negativity, and pessimism. How many times have you heard over the past few years from someone, or heard it on television, or heard it from some preacher or some church member, well, you know, people just aren't interested in spiritual matters anymore. I wish I had $1 for every time I've heard that. I'd be a wealthy man today. And what's happened is over the years, we've actually done a good job of convincing ourselves people aren't interested in spiritual things. Write this down. It's on the final exam. Churches die on a regular basis because of small vision or no vision. The wise man said in Proverbs 29 and verse 18, where there is no vision, the people perish. Beloved, our vision of the church doing great things needs to be a great vision. We need a vision of great, wonderful, glorious things the Lord's church is going to do. And then there needs to be specific action steps. One of those is inviting people to come and join us for worship. Inviting people each and every week. Have you seen the little box on the back page of the bulletin that says 54 and 24? It's on the back page. If you've got a bulletin, it's on the back page. It says 54 and 24. And then it says invite someone each week. That means issue 54 invitations in 2024, inviting someone to come and join us for church. Now, I'm going to back that off a little bit. But just think about the law of numbers. If 40 people just invite one person every week for 52 weeks to come and join us for worship, that is 2,000 invitations per year inviting people to come and worship. How many people have we invited this week? How many have we invited to join us for Friends and Family Day and stay for our luncheon? We need a vision of great things we can do. And our vision needs to have faith and boldness. We need to have faith in the gospel. We need to have faith in the power of the gospel. Paul wrote in Romans 1 and verse 16, he said, I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. Why, Paul? For it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. Are we sometimes ashamed of the gospel of Christ? Ashamed to share it with others? Think about Acts chapter 4. When Peter and John were going, in Acts chapter 3, Peter and John were going to the temple for prayer. And there's that lame man sitting at the gate, begging alms. And Peter looks at him and says, Silver and gold have I none, such as I have give I to thee. The guy's probably thinking to himself, oh, wonderful, this guy ain't got anything more than I did. Peter said, in the name of Jesus of Nazareth, rise up and walk. This beggar that had been lame stood up and walked and ran into the temple praising God. The crowd gathered and Peter started preaching to them. Well, it displeased the Sanhedrin no end, and they brought them before the council. But what does it say in Acts chapter 4 and verse 13? When they saw the boldness of Peter and John, and that they were unlearned and ignorant men, they took knowledge of them. What did they take knowledge of? They took knowledge of them that they had been with Jesus. Can that be said of us? The way I live, the way I conduct myself, the attitudes that I have, the commitment that I have, can people look at my life and take knowledge that I have been with Jesus? We need faith and boldness like Peter and John had. And it needs persistence. We need to be persistent. We can't lose heart. We will reap in due season if we faint not. In 1 Corinthians 15 verse 58, Paul would write, be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as you know your labor is not in vain in the Lord. Sometimes we just plain give up too soon. Now, let's be honest. Not all vision is good. Some folks have tunnel vision, focusing on small things, insignificant problems that exist in the church, because those are there. And then there's some folks that have just visions of despair. The woe is me mentality. They can see negative things, never can see the positive. I've been blessed. I grew up in a house where my mother was a piano teacher, and there's all kinds of old piano music laying around. We played a lot. She played a lot of that old music. But there was a song that was popular. I've got the sheet music to this, by the way. There was a song that was popular in World War II. A song that was first sung by Bing Crosby. You're afraid I'm going to sing it, aren't you? I'm not. I could, but I won't. But here's what the lyrics are to it, just part of the lyrics. You've got to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, and don't mess with Mr. In Between. That's what it says you have to do. You know, that'd be good advice for us in the church, wouldn't it? Accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, and don't mess with Mr. In Between. a vision that has grand scope, worthy of its mission, the saving of souls and teaching others, is something that has to have faith and boldness. You remember that woman at the well that we started with? Jesus told her about living water. Jesus told her about salvation. Here's the great question this morning. Is Jesus Christ the Lord and the Master of your life? Have you ever, in simple trusting faith, repenting of everything that's sin in your life, confessed the name of Christ, and been buried in the waters of baptism to wash away those past sins, and made Jesus Lord and Master of your life? If you've never done that, I beg you to do it before you leave this building this morning. But maybe you've done that. You haven't lived God's kind of life. You haven't been what you should have been. Jesus hasn't really been Lord of all of your life. You've heard this before. You're fixing to hear it again. If Jesus Christ is not Lord and Master of all of your life, He's not Lord and Master at all in your life. Are there changes you need to make? Is there something that we can help you with in your life? Is there some need you have that we can assist you? I don't know what's going on in your world or in your life, but if there's something that we can do to help you live closer to the Lord, to make Jesus Lord of your life, we'd love for you to come and let us do that as together we stand.